Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scripps Research Fully Interactive Resources for Students and Teachers, or FIRST. My name is Rosie Alvaran-Steckler, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. For those who are joining us for the first time, Scripps Research is one of the largest nonprofit private biomedical research institutes in the nation, and our mission is to develop the next generation of medicines and diagnostics to address the most pressing health concerns in the world, such as COVID-19. For those of you who are joining us again, welcome back and welcome to the new summer series titled Careers in Biomedical Research. Our goal with this series is to expose some of the different career paths available to students who are passionate about biology and chemistry and curious about research, especially in an academic setting. We hope that you can get some insight by learning about the daily work lives of our scientists and their journey to where they are now. And before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody about a few housekeeping items. All participants have been muted and your videos have been disabled. The format of the presentation today will consist of a 15-minute presentation by our invited speaker, followed by a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session, where we will be taking your questions live. To post your questions, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can do this at any time and anonymously. We will be answering them on the second half of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Cristiana Tejaro, a postdoctoral research fellow in the Shen Lab. Cristiana received a bachelor's degree in chemistry and psychology from St. Mary's College of Maryland and a Ph.D. in organic chemistry from Temple University before joining Scripps. And today she will be talking about her postdoctoral experience and her journey to Scripps Research. Welcome, Cristiana, and thank you so much.
Yep, thank you, Rosie. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Cristiana. As Rosie mentioned, I'm a postdoc here at Scripps in Florida, and today I'm going to be giving you guys an idea of what it's like to be a postdoc and how I got to this position in my career. So most of the time, especially if you're in high school or if you're in an undergrad, you really don't know what it's like to be a scientist beyond that and what is the career path for that. So traditionally, you can kind of think of, there we go. This is the general course of what it is if you want to go into academics. So when you're entering into your education beyond high school, you usually start with a bachelor's degree and then move on to either a master's degree or a PhD. And these don't have to be consecutive. You can skip and go straight to a PhD. But from then on, especially if you want to go into academics, you generally do a postdoc, and then you become what people refer to as a PI, or a primary investigator. And so this is the traditional career path for academics. So I'm going to give you guys an idea of my progression from starting as a bachelor's student up to now where I'm a postdoc. So as Rosie mentioned, I did my undergraduate degree at St. Mary's College in Southern Maryland. So you can see this is where it's located. It's right on the Chesapeake Bay. This is a picture of the campus. So it's really nice, really great atmosphere. And while I was there, I did a double major. So I actually majored in chemistry and psychology. And the reason I chose this, which was really interesting at the time, is that a lot of the pharmaceuticals or drugs that are on the market affect your body and the way you think or how you act, especially if you're thinking about diseases or cases of depression, schizophrenia, and stuff like that. So I was really interested in pharmaceuticals and drugs and how to make them and how the body works. So I decided to do a double major in chemistry and psychology. So while I was an undergrad, some of the things that I did that really prepared me for grad school, and some things for you guys to consider if you do want to go to grad school, is getting experience in teaching and in research. So in undergrad, I was a teaching assistant, so I taught general and organic chemistry labs. And this really helped learn the basics of these principles in chemistry that set me up for graduate school. And then I also did research. So as an undergraduate, I took credits and did research at St. Mary's College, but I also did a summer internship through the National Science Foundation. So there's internships that you might have heard of, like REUs, and Rosie does programs, and Scripps also does programs for research, for internships, and for summer programs. So these are things to consider, and if you're interested in those, I'm sure Rosie can give you guys more information about these. And if after the fact, if you guys are interested, I'd be more than happy to discuss more or give you guys resources for these. One of the things, especially in undergrad, that I really think is important is work-life balance and being well-rounded. And some of the things that graduate schools and jobs later on in life look for are leadership skills and being able to lead a team, communicate, be organized, time management. So some of the other activities I did in undergrad that I think were really beneficial to my career was for all 4 years I played rugby, and I was a captain and president of the team for different number of years. And this really shows your ability to work as a team, to organize, and to lead. I was also a student ambassador, so I helped out with open houses and recruiting. And then I was part of the chemical society there, doing tutoring and outreach, and just getting the general public more interested in chemistry and science and what it was. So from undergraduate, I had decided pretty early on that I was interested in going to grad school. I knew that I wanted to go, at the time I wanted to go into industry and making pharmaceutical drugs, so I knew I had to do a PhD. So at that point I moved to Temple University. Temple University is in Philadelphia, so just went up a little bit. And here I got my PhD in chemistry. And again, this was mostly from my focus on wanting to do pharmaceutical drugs. During my time in graduate school, I was a National Science Foundation Research Fellowship Program recipient. So I got a fellowship that sponsored 3 years of my graduate work and paid for me to be there. And this was really beneficial and really helpful because the more fellowships that you guys apply to and the more fellowships that you get, it just looks better and better on your CV and really sets you up for the next stage in your career. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in grad school, there's a lot of fellowships out there and scholarships that you can apply for. Specifically this NSF GRFP, you can apply for it in your senior year of undergraduate, and you can take it with you to grad school. And this is one of the things that will make you really, really high up on graduate programs list for acceptance if you have a fellowship like this. Again, so in grad school, I didn't just want to do research, and that balance is really important. So I was involved in some outside activities as well. One of the labs at Temple created this program called Generating Interest in Scientific Method Through Outreach, GISMO. So with this program, we worked with local middle school students, and we worked with science fair projects and things like that, tutoring and outreach, and going to the schools and doing demos for chemistry to really get more students interested in science. I was also a teaching orientation leader, and again, I still played rugby and hosted a bunch of seminars and talks. So again, building that skill set of leadership, organization, time management to show that I'm capable of doing all these activities and managing my time and being successful. So once I got my PhD, I moved to Scripps for my postdoc here in Florida. I currently have a fellowship through the National Institute of Health. I'm the current president of the Society of Research Fellows for the postdocs, and I'm involved in the National Women in Science organization here. So again, really promoting postdocs, women, knowledge, and gaining interest into science. And so I'll tell you now of why I chose to be a postdoc and how I transitioned from a grad student to a postdoc and why I have this career path. So one of the things that I was really interested in is natural products. So natural products are a chemical compound or substance that is produced by a living organism, and it's found in nature. So some of the things that people might be aware of is that plants, bacteria, fungi all produce compounds. So if you look at these pictures here, all of these plants produce these compounds. So you can imagine if you look at this last one here, this plant here produces this drug called Taxol, which is one of the most common cancer drugs on the market. So I was really interested in these structures and how we can use them for human health. And this is how I started in grad school. And you can imagine that sources of these are not just plants. Natural products can come from glaciers, from venom from animals, from coral reefs in the ocean, or from bacteria or fungi. And different ways that you can actually study them. There's many different parts of natural products and different types of research you can do. So you can isolate them from nature and determine what that structure actually is. You can actually synthesize them in the lab to test them for human health. You can look at the biosynthesis, so how does nature make it? And then you can also look at more on a biochemistry level, the proteins and enzymes that are responsible within the organism for making it, or how your body processes it. So when I started my graduate research, we were really interested in making these compounds. So I'm just showing an example of one compound that I worked on in grad school. So this is called melanin K. It also comes from a plant, and it was very potent for killing cancer cells. So we were really interested in how do we make this? So the plant makes this on a very small scale, so you can't just isolate it from the plant. So one of the things we did is we used organic chemistry. So for anyone that's in undergrad, you might have taken this class or be interested in taking this class. So organic chemistry is how you put compounds together from small building blocks. So you can imagine if you have a big structure like this, breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces, and then how you would actually put that together. So I'm not going to go through the details, but this is what I did in grad school. So I would go into lab, set up reactions, isolate compounds, purify them, and then with the hopes of getting to the final product to then do some type of biological testing. And it was in the last year of my Ph.D. program that really changed the way I thought about making molecules. So one of the compounds here, you can see this compound, tabersonine. We were interested in making this, but as you can see, there's lots of steps that it takes to get to this end. So if I were to start from the beginning, it'd probably take me 3 months just to get to this compound. But one of the things that we found out are these seeds. So there's a group of seeds that have this natural product that is produced in them, and you can isolate 1 gram of this compound that would take me 3 months to make in a few days from the seeds. So in my last year of my PhD program, we actually did this. We bought these African seeds. We would grind them up in a coffee grinder, and we would extract out the compound and use that for the synthesis instead. And then we also had a collaboration where another lab had developed an enzyme that could oxidize these compounds. So we were able to grow this enzyme and use it. So this really changed the way I thought about natural products. And instead of trying to just make the natural product in the lab, I was really interested in how nature makes them. And that's how I switched gears to my postdoc. So in my graduate work, I focused all on synthetic chemistry and working in the lab to build these compounds. And then my postdoc work now really is switched gears, and I focus on biosynthesis. So how does nature make these themselves? So biosynthesis, right? So this is where you take multiple enzymes within a organism. So it can be within you, a plant, bacteria, and you convert these into more and more complex things. So these are 2 examples, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but you can see here each one of these arrows encodes an enzyme or protein within the organism, and a group of these together all can produce a compound. So I was really interested in this. So the current work that I do in the Shen lab at Scripps is looking at this compound here. This is tiantomycin. It's known as an ene-diene compound. So if you are familiar with organic chemistry or naming, so ene means double bond, ine means triple bond between your carbons. So this structure right here is what it's named for. Our lab had already identified all of the proteins and enzymes that are responsible for producing this compound in bacteria. And you can see that when you grow the bacteria, it looks like this. You get these little white colonies. This is a actinomyces bacteria. What we do is we actually take these and grow it up in flasks, and we use a resin. And you can see here that at the end, this is all the bacterial cells, and that pink color is the actual compound. So we then extract the compound out, and when you dry it, it turns purple. So this is the actual tiantomycin here. And one of the things that we do in the lab is we do genetic manipulation and try to figure out how does nature build this compound and what other structures are related. So you can knock out any of these enzymes or remove them and get other compounds that look similar but have some changes, right? So here you can see there's missing a group on the end of this compound if you compare it to these. So we're able to study how these compounds are made, and then we can also test them for biological activity. So these compounds are useful for cancer drugs, and that's what we're working on in the lab, is turning these into cancer drugs. And that's the current work I'm doing as a postdoc. And so I just wanted to give a little brief comparison of how things are different for me now compared to how it was in graduate school. So in graduate school, you really are there to learn. You take classes. There's other institute requirements for candidacy, your thesis defense, and what those entail. Usually, each program has a teaching requirement for 1 year. There's some places like Scripps where you have the option to teach, but it's not required. Usually, there's also some type of research requirement to graduate where you author a paper. And sometimes, depending which lab you're in, you can get various skills in writing. So writing papers that are then published, fellowships, theses, and reading. So lots of reading. So science is reading. There's a lot out there in the literature. There's too much to read all of it. But no matter what, that's one of the skills you're always building. But the biggest change between graduate school and being a postdoc is that a postdoc is really a job. So you're no longer a student. And at this point, you take on more responsibilities when it comes to the writing aspect. So writing papers, fellowships, grants. And depending on what your ultimate goal is, if you want to go into academics and you really enjoy teaching, you can still do teaching. That is still an option, but generally you don't do any teaching. So my day, I usually go to lab and work in lab, and sometimes I'll work from home and write grants or write papers, but most of the time I'm in the lab actually doing experiments. So what's next, right? So I'm a postdoc, so I'm really interested in working at a small college. So for me, I went from my bachelor's to my PhD to my postdoc, and hopefully in the next year, I'll get a position working as a PI at a small university. But there's many different options. So if you're not sure what you want to do, I really would suggest thinking about what careers interest you. What different skill sets are you interested in? Do you like teaching? Do you like reading? Do you like writing? And all these things, because at any stage in this learning experience, you can branch out, right? There's jobs that just require bachelor's degrees. There's jobs that require master's degrees, PhD, and so on. So just because there's a traditional course doesn't mean this is the course for everyone. So really think about what you're interested in and research how do people in that field get to where they are. So with that, I hope you guys learned something, and I'd be happy to take questions that you guys have.
So I think the first question, Christiana, refers to your slide number 10. I know that you already brought the slides down, but it is the colorful line chart of 10 a gene diagram. I guess that's what they meant, 10. I don't know.
Yeah, so the colorful diagram was a gene diagram. So one of the things that we know about bacteria is that when these natural products are formed from the bacteria, there's a gene cluster, and this gene cluster is called a biosynthetic gene cluster, or BGC. So all of the genes that make a certain compound are grouped together, and then they're usually color-coded by us based on the gene's function. So if it is something that adds a sugar molecule to it, it'll all be one color. If it's something that deals with resistance, so like, for instance, you know about bacterial resistance and drugs. So these compounds that are really cytotoxic, if they don't have a resistance mechanism, they'll kill the bacteria that are producing them. So a lot of them have resistance genes or transport genes.
Sorry, the second question is there a reason other than salary range that further training is needed? I like this question a lot.
Yeah, so I think this really depends why you're interested in science. I think most people that go into science are more curiosity driven and want to learn more. So it really depends on your job and what you want, right? So if you want to teach at a university, you have to do a PhD at the minimum to teach at a college. So it really depends on the job that you want. If you want to go into industry, there's different positions for bachelor's, master's, PhD. So it really depends how far up you want to go. Do you want to lead your own group and have people working under you? And things like that. So really what drives you and why is, I think, a better reasoning for doing a PhD or a postdoc.
Great, that was a great answer. Next question, do you know if postdoc experience looks good to industry, or is it only an academic path?
So one of the things that is really important is the type of industry position you want. If you want to work for a big pharmaceutical company with a big name, say Pfizer, Merck, companies like that, they're really looking for the top candidates. And so you want to be really competitive. So if you go to a PhD program that's in the top 20 schools, most likely you can go directly from your PhD to the industry job. But if, for instance, you don't do that, so for instance, I went to Temple University, and if I wanted to go into industry, I would need to do a postdoc first to get into a big pharmaceutical company like that. So they really do value that extra experience. If you want to do a small biotech company, it's not necessary to do the postdoc, but you will look more qualified on the job application.
Great. So the next question is about your changing field. So was it easy to change fields of research from grad school to postdoc?
So I think this really depends on what transition you're making. So since I was going from chemistry more to biology, I think it was easier than if I were to go the other way around. So biology uses chemistry all the time. So if you think about the Krebs cycle or how your body metabolizes glucose, right? The chemistry is all the same. So I already knew the principles behind the biology. I just didn't know how to pipette or how to turn a PCR on. So those things are really easy to learn. And I think too, choosing your postdoc lab is also very crucial, because I chose a lab where there's a lot of knowledge and people are very collaborative. So when I first came, I actually had a graduate student who trained me on how to do these things. And so that was really helpful, and it was a really easy transition.
That's great. So the next question, how do you grow enzymes in a lab? I thought it would be manufactured.
So actually what we do is we take that bacteria and we actually isolate its DNA. And from isolating the DNA, we can then clone the enzyme we're interested in. So we use PCR, or polymerase chain reaction, where we actually clone that protein ourselves, and then we grow it in a host. So we use E. coli most of the time to grow the protein, and then we actually isolate it and purify it on a machine in lab.
Great. So the next question is about your next step. You said you wanted to be a PI later. So what is the process for applying for tenure track positions to be a PI at a university?
Yeah, so the process for applying to tenure track jobs, so generally you'll have your CV and your resume that has a list of your education, your publications, any type of career-oriented activity. And then you'll also have a research summary of everything you've done up to this point. And then you'll have a research proposal. And this research proposal would be what you would do in your own lab. And generally you have 2 projects that you propose. And these are things that you then would write grants for to get funding. Depending on the school, so if you go to a primary undergrad institute or a 4-year college only, they will also require that you write a teaching philosophy, so how you think teaching is effective and what type of teaching you would do. For bigger schools, for Scripps and other big institutes like University of Pennsylvania, University of Maryland, things like that, the teaching isn't a huge focus, the research is the focus. So some of those places don't require any teaching philosophy.
Great. I think the questions today are really good. And so the next one is really good too. So do you think there's anything you didn't learn during your undergraduate career that you wish you had learned because you needed it during your PhD program? For example, programming, statistics, soft skills, and yes, programming statistics, I know that they're big, especially right now in bioinformatics. So what's your take
Yes.
on this
So
one?
so there isn't anything that I think I needed for my PhD, but there are things that I wish I had done way back in undergrad for my postdoc. So switching over now, I actually do bioinformatics now, and I have zero background in computers and coding and software. So I have spent most of the quarantine learning these. So I actually bought classes online and I'm learning coding and Python now that I really wish I would have done a long time ago. So I think any knowledge about how to use computers was always going to be beneficial.
Great. So next question, what are the biggest differences between academia and industry?
This is a good question. So I'd say the biggest difference is creativity and freedom to choose the project that you work on. So when you're in industry, you're specifically looking to make new pharmaceutical drugs. And a lot of the time, the higher up companies will tell you which disease state you're working on and which type of target. So when you're given a project, your project is already defined for you. When you're in academics, this is completely different. You get to choose the project that you want to work on and what your lab wants to work on. So that's the biggest difference between industry and academics.
Great. And what was the biggest challenge you faced in grad school and in your postdoc, and how did you overcome these challenges?
Ooh, the biggest challenge I think is time management. Life is very, very busy and time goes very, very fast. So if you want to be productive and get done and graduate on time or move on to the next phase of your career on time, it is very important to manage your time and to focus. Um, and that applies for high school and undergraduate, having classes and homework and extracurricular activities. It's all about getting things done efficiently and using the time that you have
Right. And actually, the next steps, it applies to everything. Yeah, I
wisely.
completely agree with that. I guess that was the last question. So to segue, one other question that students have been asking lately is, so when you were thinking about grad school, did you have any hesitation? Did you have like self-doubt? Was it an easy process to say, yes, I'm gonna go to grad school and I have no fear?
No, so the self-doubt and wondering if this is the right choice never stops. I still have those feelings now and then of, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I should be doing? A lot of people in science, there's this thing called imposter complex,
Syndrome?
that where you are inferior, you always feel that everyone else is better and that you're not good enough, and that's not true. Everyone thinks that way. So really you have to push that to the back of your mind. And like when I first chose to go to grad school, I also was like, well, what else am I going to do? Like I didn't know what job I wanted. I knew I wanted to learn more and I was really interested in the learning, and so I thought that that would be the best choice. And so when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing and was very nervous. So I think those fears aren't going to go away, and sometimes you just have to make the best decision for what you want to do.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Other of our scientists, grad students, postdocs, they share these stories, and it's important for the undergraduates to know, and the high schoolers to know these and to keep going. So there's one more question here. So regarding picking up Python now versus back in your undergrad career, was this something you were aware of then? How do we know what to pick up now if we don't know if it will be helpful in the future?
Yeah, that's a really great question. At the time, I had no idea that that would be a skill that I needed now. So I think the best thing to do, especially in college, if you have extra credits, take something that's out of your field and out of your comfort zone, because you never know how it's going to help and benefit you in the long run. And the biggest thing about a PhD is really teaching you how to think, right? No matter what you do your PhD in, the whole purpose is that you want to start thinking on your own, and you want to come up with new ideas, be creative. And if you learn something that's in a different field, you're constantly pushing yourself and incorporating new knowledge. And a lot of the times you might not think that they have anything in common, but they do. So like chemical engineering, physics, all of that plays roles in chemistry for me, computer science, things like that. So it's hard to predict. And yes, I would have never predicted computers were going to be something that I really needed to learn. But if I would have taken just a couple classes outside of my comfort zone, I might have learned something then that could have better prepared me.
Great, great answer. So we don't have any other questions. So do you have any final thoughts for the students about, if they're curious about research, how to get started?
Yeah. So I think some final thoughts, especially so for anyone that's in high school, I'd say take as many classes that you can that are different subjects, and get a feel for what you like. And especially in college. So when I entered college, I was not a chemistry major. I was a chemical engineering major, and I took physics for the first time, and I thought it was something I never want to do again. So I switched. So it's okay to switch, and it's okay to change your mind. That's one thing. And then for all the undergraduates, I think final thoughts is really think about what excites you and what motivates you and what interests you. Like if you don't want to get out of bed and do something for the rest of your life, is it worth pursuing? So really dig deep and think about what excites you and follow that. Yeah, I think that's the best advice I could give.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us today for a great presentation. I think students were able to really get an understanding of what the postdoc step is, that sometimes they don't know exactly what this career step is. And also your answers, it was a great conversation. So thank you so much for your time today. So these are the upcoming webinars. The next one next week is on robotics in drug discovery. What is biomedical engineering? So go to our page to register on the same page that you used to register for this webinar. Actually, when we close this call, you will be redirected to our Canvas page where you can find previous videos and learn about the future webinars and register. And if you have any questions, our contact information is also in that page. And feel free to send us an email or to give us a call. We're always happy to follow up. And we hope to see you again next time. Thank you.